Okay, Mike. Thanks for
Hey,
finally
Mitch.
coming on. Any of you who have watched my podcast in the last, I don't know, since I started working at Square, basically, you would have heard me mention Mike, my manager. This is Mike, my manager.
Hey.
Um, yeah, he's great, and I wanted to have him on. I mean, you've heard me say you're great on my podcast, I'm sure, if you've watched them, so you already know that. So let's just get into it, and I want to. I generally always start these the same way. I always kind of go with like, how did you get into programming? Some people probably don't even know that managers actually were programmers at one point.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's going to be a bit of a story. I have a bit of a non-traditional background. Um, there's a few answers. The real answer is that I seriously got into coding after college. I graduated in 2012. Did some other stuff for a while. We can actually talk about that. I was originally in the film industry for a few years, and started picking up programming kind of during that. Honestly, mostly just out of interest. And at some point, I decided this is a thing I'd rather be doing. So that was maybe like 2013 that I really started programming seriously. But I did do some stuff before that. I took some CS in college, but like very little. And in high school, I actually do you know what Mathematica is?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I used it a lot.
Yeah, so in high school, I did a lot of Mathematica stuff. I was actually in like a weird, like advanced math class that was just entirely messing with Mathematica. So like that's obviously more of a specialized language, but I feel like the root of the programming actually started there much earlier.
Yeah, I was in a very similar class. Like sounds the same. It was like, "Oh, here we've got these really complex problems and we want to learn how to like model them and look visualize them. And here's this software, Mathematica, and we used Python a little bit too. And yeah, basically just trying to like build models."
It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of like visualizations of random stuff. We were very encouraged to just like play around with whatever interested us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was did you ever see the website Wolfram Alpha?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's basically Mathematica, right?
Yeah, it's those guys. I think the language is called like the Wolfram language or something. I don't actually know. I haven't looked at Mathematica in like over 10 years for sure.
Yeah, mine would have been, yeah, I don't know, not 10 years, probably 8 years or something like that. But yeah, a long time.
But yeah, that's probably where it started. The technical interest also goes way back there. Like in high school, I was building my own computers and stuff too.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. So you started in the film industry and what you just started learning to code like on the internet by yourself?
Yeah, I guess I lied a little bit. So out of college, we lived with my then girlfriend, now wife, family for a while. Her dad had cancer. It was a sad thing. So I had like effectively like a desk job for that year that I didn't, you know, wasn't super engaging. So I actually started learning to code at that job. And it was really interesting to me, and it just sort of spread into my nights and weekends too. I was doing a lot of it for fun. This was sort of like also at the advent of like the MOOCs. I forget what that stands for, like massive online open classes or something,
Oh, I don't
like
know.
Coursera and EDX and stuff like that before they got really like profit driven.
Hmm.
So I was taking all of these courses that were from like these actual real schools for free, which was really cool. And there was no real like professor interaction, but like uh, there was like some algorithms course from Stanford I remember struggling through very, very early on, and there was some like graphing algorithm we had to implement, and I remember my solution took like 10 hours to
Oh
run, which was
God.
awful, but I was like so proud of myself for actually having figured it out on my own and gotten an answer that was correct.
No, nice. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, algorithms are no fun. Even today, I still sometimes. Well, I mean, you have a choice in the interview process. You can either do like the Android style, which I go for, obviously, or you can do the algorithm one. And the algorithm one just seems like zero fun to me. I don't know. I think you got to spend like a lot of time just getting in the mindset of those, that kind of problem, and then they probably become repetitive after, but it probably takes a long time.
What's interesting is there's some of my favorite interviews to give or sit in because they're some of the only times you can actually get to watch somebody think and like reason through a problem out loud.
True.
Usually, I find that with like mobile demonstrate your skills type interviews, it's very much like in the first 5 minutes, it's easy to see like this person knows what they're doing. This is probably going to go well.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's kind of either you've done it before and you know how to do it, or you don't.
And but sometimes it doesn't go well. Like the interviews are worth doing, but yeah, I like to see how people think. But they're
True.
also stressful for sure.
Yes, very stressful. Okay, so you're a manager. I'm an IC. That's an independent contributor, by the way, for those of you who didn't know. I didn't know all these terms when I first started, so I'm assuming a lot of people don't.
I didn't either. Just pick them up.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know there's two routes you can choose at your job. You can either, go the IC route and which is essentially a non-manager route, and then the manager route, which is obviously the manager route. And you can choose, and the pay is like a little different, I think, but it's pretty close. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
it's not.
sure.
I mean, I can only really speak to the organizations I've been at, but it is usually not very different. It's pretty close. It also is affected by geo and stuff. So like for a company, it's like Square that pays based on where you live partially. Like I'm in one of the lower tiers living in Missouri, and I definitely have lower income than some ICs out there, and not others.
Yes, comp.
It's variable completely. It also highly depends on your company and the culture of that company. I'm sure there are companies where managers are paid way more, and I'm sure there are companies where they're not paid differently at all.
Yeah, okay. Well, from what I've heard at Square is like generally the pay is like pretty similar. Managers might get a little more, but it's
It's very
pretty.
much a different job, and I think that's something a lot of people I think miss when they're thinking about it. Even me, when I started thinking about it, I was just kind of like, oh, this is an exciting next step. Those are problems I'm interested in solving, and I really wasn't ready for how much of a different headspace you're in entirely. I think that's sort of what is an interesting divergence in the two paths. There sort of becomes a point where it's like, are you interested in sort of going technically deeper and becoming truly responsible for the code, all the inner workings of whatever you're building, or are you more interested in the larger picture and you're more interested in empowering the other people to do that work? And I didn't know it, but I think I'm a bit more of like a forest person than a tree person.
Hmm. People people tell me that they think that I would be a good manager, but I really think they're wrong. I don't like
Why do you think they're wrong?
I don't know. Yeah, why do I think they're wrong? I don't think I care enough about people's feelings. I honestly, that's probably like I think I think I lack in the empathy department, and I think that's very important. Like if
I
somebody,
definitely agree it's important. I don't know that I agree you lack in the empathy department, but maybe
yeah,
maybe
I
that's
don't
another
know.
conversation.
I could be wrong, but like I honestly I hear that a lot from like my family, especially. Like I have a lot of my dad has a big family, and so like all the uncles and aunts and all the things, and so one of my cousins actually is a software engineer also, and so we
Mhm.
talk about software engineer. He's older, so he's been doing it a lot longer. I think he's like 40 or 42 or something.
Okay.
And now he's going into like the manager kind of path because that's naturally what happens usually as you become more senior. That's Square. It's not the case. Like you have manager or IC, and you can go up either way. But where he is, it's like it's either the only path up is manager. So now he's becoming more
Interesting.
manager. Yeah. So then we talk about it, and I'm always like, man, I don't know if I could do like the manager thing. He's like, I don't know. You'd be surprised. I didn't think I could either, and it's great. And then my aunts and my uncles would be like, you'd probably make a good manager. And I'm like, why does everyone say that? I think you're wrong. But anyway,
I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to say on here. I don't
nothing.
want to start
I'm kind.
directly.
I don't know. I kind of just went on a tangent.
I do want to note something actually. Sorry for interrupting. I think at Square there's very much like the two different career paths, for the most part, but in a lot of other companies, managers take on different forms, which is kind of interesting. Like I've been in a management role that is more of like a player coach, which is absolutely not what I do now on a technical level.
Oh
And
yeah. Okay.
that's kind of interesting. And I generally, the smaller of a company you are, the more of that you're going to see. Where there's less organizational overheads, there's sort of less need for the managers to do more of that, and a lot more
Right.
time can be spent with the team and with the tech. So there's even a bit of if you want to be a manager, what kind of manager do you want to be?
Yeah, I don't know. I you probably kind of already answered this, but like, yeah, why did you become a manager? Like what why did you choose from, you know, writing code all day or most of the day to writing code almost never?
Truly, because at the time I had a really good opportunity to lead a team I had been on that was growing that I was excited about. So it was just kind of a no-brainer. Like, yes, I absolutely want to do that. But I think it does a little bit speak to my skill sets. I've always been a little more organizationally focused, and just kind of generally interested in like the management of people from like a how do we get this large thing done perspective. And that even that sort of like traces back through my entire life a little bit. Like in high school, I was always interested in stage management and did a lot of stage management in theater. In college, I managed two coffee shops on campus,
Hmm.
stuff like that. Even in the film industry, I was a paperwork PA, and I was working towards being a second assistant director, which is more of a like behind the scenes organizational role.
Mm. Sounds like it was in your blood. Like now that I hear that, that's like just what that's what you've always done, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. And sometimes I can feel a little bad about it because it leads me feeling like I'm not myself much of a maker, you know? But I always have really enjoyed like getting the big thing to come together. Like every time the team has a launch and it's not stressful and I can sit back and just be like, we did it. It's a great feeling.
Well, I mean, you're kind of a maker. You're not like, hands-on making it, but like there's a lot of choices that come up and there's a lot of discussions that happen with the people who are doing the making. And so you're kind of you're guiding the making.
That's what I enjoy. It's sort of like it's almost like work is like this living, breathing organism, and like everybody in it is a human who has their own like needs and wants and desires inside and outside of work, and you're just sort of like trying to weave all of that together so you can get it moving in the right direction at the right time, which is a
Wow.
really interesting problem, I think, and is like it's one that is constantly shifting throughout work because all of the variables are constantly changing.
Yeah, because you're dealing with people and people are all over the place, really.
Right. Especially at an organization like Square, where you're dealing with like countless other orgs as well who want different things, whose plans are changing at the drop of the hat, who might not even tell you about it. Right. There's a ton of thinking on your feet, and that is really like engaging for me.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. There's a lot of moving parts all the time. Different yeah, project managers coming in. Oh wait, we need this instead.
Right.
Engineers doing, a million variables even with the team of engineers, Someone gets sick.
Oh yeah, like hey, we found this something came up, and this is going to take 4 more weeks to implement than we thought it's going to be. What do we do? Right. It happens all the time.
Yeah, it does. Um cool. That was a good analogy.
Thanks.
The living breathing organism thing. That was great.
I've said it to a few people, and every time I'm like, "Is this stupid?" But nobody's
No, no,
nobody's
no.
called me out yet.
That was good. That was really good. Okay. Now let's what do you think is the best how should I say this? Oh, okay, let's start with this actually. What is your style, I guess, your overarching style? Like what I mean is I think there's kind of two ways you can manage people at a high level and it to get like the most out of them. You can be like expect a lot, demand a lot. If you don't deliver, you're getting in trouble. It's like you guys need to do this. You need to work a lot. You need to get this shit done. And then there's the other side where it's kind of like, softer, I guess. It's like these are the things you need to do. Um, I'm not gonna say much to you or ride you.
Interesting, because there are parts of both ones that you said that I think are like describe me, and parts that really don't. Like I do generally expect a lot. We have like a very high powered team. Everybody does good work. I do expect that to keep up. I expect people to be sort of like growing, learning, doing different things throughout the org, all of that stuff. But I think the core answer really has to do with like the culture you want to create. And I think at the end of the day, if you're saying like, I need you to do X and I need you to do it by Y date or else, and there's this constant thing about you're not performing. I want you to do better. Nobody's going to be happy. And I think at the end of the day, the right work isn't going to get done. You're also then teaching all of your engineers that they need to like directly depend on you for instruction. And you know, maybe some managers out there can do that, but I definitely can't do that. So I'm really interested in creating a team of people who like really feel like they have the autonomy to do whatever needs to be done. And I tried. I mean, leader is sort of the term here, and I feel uncomfortable with that for various reasons. But I do try to generally lead when it comes to priorities. Here's what I think we should be doing. Here's who I think should be doing it for these reasons. But I always think of it as a little bit of a give and take. Like I genuinely want to know what is everybody interested in. Where do people feel like their skills lie? Where do people want to deepen their skills? And I try to also like weave all of that into the guidance as well. So it's a little bit of
What is guidance? What is guidance?
Oh, okay. Good question. Guidance could be anything. So, like, at the end of the day, I have basically two main goals, I guess. One is grow my engineers, and that's kind of the main one. Like, at every point, I want people to be, maybe not at every point, but generally, I am hoping all of my engineers are continually bettering themselves in some way, right? Like, especially the people who are really promotion motivated, who really care about getting to the next level. Like, if I'm
Like me.
sure, like you. Like if I'm not putting you on work that is in some way stretching you in the right direction, I'm not doing a good job by you. The second thing is there are like company goals that I have to hit. There are big launches that we're a part of, and I have to make sure the product gets out the door to sellers, right? And if I can't do that, then I haven't done my job by, my boss, by the powers that be, whoever. And those two things often can fight against each other. So when I say guidance, I'm more talking about the first one, like things that I think people should be doing to deepen their skills or whatever it is. But it is sometimes the second one as well. Like we need to hit this priority, so I think you should do X over Y because you're the right person for it, or it'll get us there faster. Sometimes it can't be related to the thing you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of lots of examples. We're not obviously allowed to talk about specifics, but
right, it's tough.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I probably shouldn't even bother trying to say anything because I'm just going to say something I shouldn't. But I can think of times when, yes, I've been doing things that I wanted to do and that are moving me towards that promotion. Then all of a sudden you're like, hey, we actually need you to go do this for a while because there's a deadline. And
right.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to do that, but I'm always thinking like, how do we get back to that or another
Yeah.
thing that is as good or better?
Yeah.
But to round back to the original question of like, what style of manager am I? I'm definitely more of the, I guess, chill style. Like I do try to give people a lot of space. I'm serious about like the weekly one-on-ones, making sure we're keeping touch. But even those, I like to tailor to a person, and they can be more or less chill depending on the needs of that individual. But I have found over time that writing people really, really hard generally doesn't lead to success. And I find it actually a lot easier to sort of describe the ideal end state and help a person figure out how to get from A to B. And I think involving people in that also just really like gives that feeling of autonomy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know, but just like in the little amount that I've thought about it, it seems like if you are doing what you can to move the person towards their goals, they're probably going to do their best. Right?
Well, also people, if they understand why they're working on something,
Yeah.
like what it does for them,
Exactly.
they're generally pretty invested in making sure it goes well. So like
Yeah.
most of the time I'm trying to line up this two birds, one stone thing where I can match the right person with the right priority to move both things forward. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at that actually, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're good at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I guess it's pretty easy. Mitch wants to get promoted. What can you give Mitch to do so he gets promoted faster?
It's a little deeper than that though, because you have specific technical interests, and I think
I
it's
guess,
very
yeah,
clear
true.
where you want to go, and sometimes that is not necessarily the same thing as build whatever seller-facing thing Square needs.
Generally, yeah, that's something I discovered about myself just working at Square, honestly, was that the things that I like to work on, it's I didn't expect it, but it kind of makes sense because it's kind of like what I always have done, like the things that don't make sense and the weird problems I like those. I don't know. They excite me. And whereas like just building out random new feature, I like that. It's fine, but it
Sure.
doesn't like, yeah, it doesn't like, I don't go to work thinking, yes, let's try and do this, you know? And
I think
everybody has preferences.
I think that's a process a thought process rather, a lot of people go through as well as they get more senior in their careers. Like, I bet however many years ago you would have been really thrilled to just sit there and build out screens. Like, I can definitely remember earlier in my career, I would have been like, this is the work I want to be doing. Customers are going to see this. This is awesome. So I think it's sort of as you get technically deeper, I think you need a little bit more to make you tick, and that's when people really start to go off in interesting directions and specialize.
Yeah, yeah, it probably just comes down to what's keeping you excited. You know, like if you compared working on an assembly line, you know, where you're just doing the same thing over and over every day, and maybe some people want to do that. I don't know, but to me, it seems very unexciting.
Some people really do, though. And what's interesting is there are sort of acceptable terminal senior levels where it's okay to just write really solid code and do the thing the business needs to do, but not necessarily try to invest yourself more. And balancing those two as a manager is also interesting.
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like working on an assembly line is like for a dummy or something. It's just like it. All I mean is like you are doing pretty much the same thing you do all the time. You have like a good amount of knowledge, and that amount of knowledge is great, and you're just don't have to.
It's very focused on doing the thing you do well.
Yeah. Oh, I had a question. Now I don't remember it. Oh yeah. I was thinking of a lot of things when you were talking there, because everybody has different preferences, and you know, keeping people your team happy and doing the best work they can, I think is probably pretty tricky. Like, what do you think is the best way to keep your team happy, I guess, and like moving towards whatever things they got to be doing?
I find a thing that really this is a bit of a squishy answer, admittedly, but I find a thing that really helps is reminding people that work is not the end all be all of everything. I'm serious. Like,
No, I know you
really
do it all the
helps people
time.
feel like, you know, it's the end of the day, and we've decided as an organization we're going to take half of Friday off, so please go do that. Or like, hey, I see it's 7 p.m. Maybe you can do this tomorrow. I think people really respond well to that. Like, those are small moments, and realistically, in those moments, I'm rarely ever actually sacrificing anything, but it tells the person, like, hey, you can slow down and be a human and come back, and the work will still be here. And I think when you do that, people are much more inclined to say, oh, great, I'm going to go take my time, and then I want to come back and really get this work done. And I actually feel that way too myself. Like, one of the things I really like about Square is that they're great at work-life balance. And when I want to go, you know, drive up to Chicago for a few days, I can just do that as long as everything else is sorted. And if something happens and I have to deal with it, I'll be responsible and deal with it when I come back. And I think if you can sort of, we're glossing over the what happens when projects go wrong part, which we can talk about. But I think if you can create that culture, that's a lot of the way there. I think the second half of that is working with people one-on-one and making sure that they each feel like they're growing and that their needs individually are being met. And I don't even necessarily mean needs from a career growth at work perspective. I even mean like baseline needs. Like, if people need to be put on a easier project and they have to hand off their thing because something is going on with their life, I want to be able to recognize that and do that for them. I think that personal connection really helps keep the team happy and involved.
Yeah, you definitely tell people to take time off. I can confirm that.
What's funny though is if you look at the spread of the team's time off, which I wish we could do, but it's really not that crazy.
Actually, yeah, I was looking at mine. It's not really, because I shouldn't do this, but I can't help myself. I keep like a mental map of when people take off time. I don't know why. And
I used to do stuff like that, and I just don't even.
I try to not, and I can't. It's like, get this out of my head. But anyway, yeah, people don't take that much time off. Maybe because I don't want to be the one to take the most time off. That's probably what it is.
That's a very common feeling. I get a lot of what's the average amount of time people take off, because people want to feel like they can do it, but don't want to push it.
Yeah, you don't want to be the one taking the most time off. You know, I don't know.
you know if you're taking too much time off, right? Like the people who are worried about this are usually the people who are like, I'm going to take a 4-day weekend. Is that okay? And it's like, yes, it's okay. Nobody's ever like, I'm going to take 5 weeks off. Is that okay? Right. And if they were, then we would talk about it, and maybe depending on the situation, if that's like a one-off thing, maybe it's okay. I don't know, but
Hmm.
but generally nobody's really pushing the boundary.
Mm. Yeah, I was just looking at my time off. I think I looked yesterday, and I've only taken 4 days since I came back.
What's funny is I actually noticed this like a week or two ago, and I considered poking you to say like, maybe you could take some more vacation, but then I remembered you were on paternity.
Yeah, I was gone for 4 months, so it's
Yeah.
kind of like I feel like I should put in some time, probably.
You could certainly take more time, but that's also like an interesting one. There are no guidelines for what happens if you were on paternity and now you want to know how much vacation is okay, or like you started 3/4 of the way through the year, how much vacation is okay. That's all like people get stressed about that stuff. And I think it's important to try to make those stressors go away as much as possible. Like I don't hand wave it. I will actually answer the question, and I have had to tell people in the past they're taking too much vacation, just not here. But I think if you just approach the conversation from a reasonable standpoint, it's pretty easy to have.
Yeah, I think it's exactly how you said it. People know when they're taking too much time off. It's pretty obvious, you know.
The person I talked to was at like 50 plus days, and I had asked for more vacation, and I was like, maybe we should talk about this one. It was all right, and even then, I was like, Mike, you've put this off too. It was like the first time I ever had to contend with this. I definitely waited too long.
Well, I guess while we're talking about spending time on things, how much time do you think is, yeah, how do you feel, just in general, how do you feel about meetings? Do you think, how much
You're gonna
this
be
was,
fired.
this is, well, this was something I struggled with when I started because I was used to working alone and, never talking to anybody all day pretty much. And then I started and
Yeah.
it's like, holy shit, all these meetings and a lot of them you don't got to be in really. And yeah, I don't know. I think I have a good balance now, but what do you think?
It's my perspective on this has actually changed a lot since the beginning, and it's sort of I started really liking meetings, really hated them for a while, and now I'm somewhere in the middle. I think it's because when I first started programming, I was on a really small team of 3 people, so all of our meetings were like really collaborative and really productive. Never felt like any time was wasted. And then, as sort of I first became a manager, I felt like I was just in a lot of time wasters, and there are still time wasters today. But I've kind of come to realize that some of it is just necessary time spent required to align people on a thing, even if some of it is repetitive. And a lot of that is because people have different focuses, right? And not necessarily even having the same conversation if they're in the same room, until you have it a few times, especially around something that takes months to plan. It's a bit frustrating. With team stuff, I try to keep it as minimal as possible. Like if I feel like there's drag time in a meeting, I'll generally try to cut that thing out of the meeting or change the meeting or just end the meeting earlier. But yeah, it's frustrating when you're trying to be heads down programming. You don't I definitely understand the feeling. They're frustrating, but I do think some degree of meetings are necessary. Like I would never give up our sprint plannings or stand ups. Um, but also, as a manager, some of those meetings have more value to me than they did before. Like stand up, for example, before was kind of like, I know what I'm doing, so I'll say it out loud, whatever. But stand up as a manager is really valuable because it's like maybe I haven't talked to this person in a few hours or a day or something. I really want to hear these updates, and it can be a good generator of to-do lists for the rest of the day or the rest of the week as well.
No, I think we have a good balance. I don't actually remember when I started what it was like. I don't think it was that much different. I remember I thought there was too many meetings, but that's because I think I thought I had to go to more than I do. And yeah, but yeah, yeah, I think you do a good job because yeah, you are very dynamic with the meetings. Like you'll cut things. Like you'll ask us, "Hey, do you think that part of the meeting was worthwhile?" And
I
then
mean, we voted to not have a retro yesterday.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
I think retros are super important, but we had one 2 weeks ago. We're having one in 3 weeks. If our goal is to have them every 4 weeks, do we really need this one?
Hmm.
Probably not.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I like I don't know if I might cut this out. We'll see if, I don't know if I should say this, but that's okay. Yeah, I like how we do our stand-ups now with the iOS team, because then we know, like, it's easier to get aligned, and like sometimes there's little things that come up, and it's definitely the way to do it, even though most of the time I'm not really paying attention to what they're saying. But if you're working on similar things, similar features, it's super useful. Like little things that just you would never have noticed get noticed a lot better.
For that reason, I like having the platforms work on projects at the same time too, because otherwise, we've done it in the past before where things are sort of staggered by like a few months, and that never works out.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, 100%. That's a bad idea. It'll be like iOS will be like, oh, but we had to like change this thing, but then because they didn't ask Android, that's so hard to do on Android and screws everything up. And it's, yeah, better to do it at the same time for sure.
You were asking me something interesting about how many hours in the meeting question. I was curious where that was going. Like I was curious if you were going to ask like how many hours of meetings is correct or something. I definitely don't have an answer to that. But
Yeah, that's not really a question. I think there is an answer to, so I don't think there's a point of answering that. I got a juicy one here actually. What gives you the most anxiety at work? What thing do you do that gives you the most anxiety, or like you worry the most about? I came up with this question because something recently at work gave me probably the most anxiety I've ever had at work, and I was
oh,
like, wow,
interesting.
yeah. I,
This is a good question. But the thing that really jumps to my mind is like anytime I feel like I'm going to fail one of the engineers on the team. Like if I'm putting promos are super anxiety inducing. Like even if think I've done a great job on a promo packet, I think I'm really representing somebody well. At Square, there's always like, there's a panel of peers that you have to get through, and if they don't agree, that can be really frustrating. So going into those is really, really anxiety inducing because I know it affects like that person's happiness at work and their livelihood, and all of that stuff is incredibly important. I actually don't get that much anxiety about deadlines and stuff because I think I do a decent job trying to work far enough ahead that we can shift things around to avoid some sort of crunch. Like there are usually enough levers to pull that I feel relatively in charge of something like that. It's more when I feel not in charge of something that I'm worrying about it going wrong.
so yeah, I mean, I'm generally the same. I don't get much either, but I thought of this question because recently I got my first, I would say, like, anxiety event at work. I think I can say it. I think it's fine. It was
I'll cut it out.
yeah, I can always cut it out. I won't say as the specifics, but I can say generally what it is. It's what I got handed, that project that I didn't write the design for, that and there's already like, and the timeline is already built. Like, oh, this is going to take you this long. This is going to take you this long, and this design just got handed off to me with a timeline and expectations, and I'm like, I haven't even, like, I don't know what the hell is happening here. How do I know that I'm going to meet these deadlines when I didn't write this design? Like, that's like, oh boy.
But this is actually a really interesting one to bring up because this is directly related to me. Like, as the person who said, "Hey, Mitch, I think you should do this work," I'm the person who directly caused the anxiety, even if it wasn't my intent, right? So there's
True.
like an interesting, question in there about how that can be avoided in the future, right? Like there was a thing here about, I don't know, stuff happened elsewhere in the org, so we needed to shift project ownership, right? And that has
True.
nothing
Yeah.
to do with you one way or another. It just so happened to be that this is a great project for you to do, probably both for you and for the business, like I was talking about before. So yeah, I mean, I think avoiding that anxiety is important. I know we talked a little bit about this already, but I think there are ways to do that. But I actually think you're touching on something really interesting here. We can only avoid that anxiety or lessen it because we're willing to have the conversation. I want to sort of go all the way back to the thing you said at the beginning about engineering management styles. I think if I was more of a like, hey, Mitch, this is your project, this is your end date, go, we wouldn't have had that conversation, and you'd probably be getting more and more anxious rather than being like, oh, I can, we'll start on this early and take more time to understand it.
Yeah, I think it'll be fine because we talked about it, and I was like, yeah, I would feel better if you gave me like an extra week, before the project starts.
And you need that flexibility too. And even if I hadn't been able to say that, it could have been like, okay, this project is being taken up by a new engineer on a different team. Can we revisit the timelines associated with it? And like that's a conversation we haven't even had yet, but that would have been my next step if there wasn't something else we could do.
Well, I'll spend the week, and then, but after that, I'll know. Like, I'll know. I'll have my own timeline.
What's funny is I'm not worried about this project at all because at this point I feel like I know you really well as a worker and as an engineer. I totally understand where your anxiety comes from, and I think honestly, 10 out of 10 engineers in the same position would also feel something.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's like you're getting handed something else. It's something that someone else planned, and that's always like, might be fine. I don't.
Right, might be fine, might be planned absolutely terribly.
Yeah. I guess while we're talking about managers and projects that they give you and all that stuff, I have been told by several experienced people, Rahul actually, who I had on my podcast, also people who I've talked to at Square, many managers. They say that when it comes to getting promoted, your manager is your biggest asset. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that, or somewhere in between?
I think that's definitely true. I think there's a follow-up question like, is that good? But I do definitely think that's true because it's your manager who's going to be the person who works from you from level X to level Y, who helps you figure out what you should be working on to be able to get there. Like usually some people have some sort of gap, and that might not even be like they're failing at something. It might even just be they haven't started doing something yet, or haven't started doing it fully. They're still getting help or something like that. I think without a good manager to direct you through that, you could be spending a lot more time than you should at a given level. Yeah, you sort of need that. Yeah, the way I kind of try to think about it is that I always want people to read English is hard. I always want people to be doing work that is like their current ability plus one, sort of. Like I want them to be able to do something that is a little tricky in some way. And you can't always hit that, but I do think it's very easy for managers to let people kind of languish in insanely work. And then again, at Square at least, we have to write this whole massive like 10-page promo packet. And that is very as like that's entirely up to the manager. If they do a bad job on that promo packet, there's really nobody that's gonna come in and correct it.
Hold on a second. I gotta let my dog in. She's scratching.
Yeah, shoot, that's important.
Okay. Yeah. I see how tricky that could be though, with giving people the work. Someone wants to get promoted. How do you give them the work that will get them promoted? That's basically the question. But then, yeah, it's like you have to. You also have deadlines and you have responsibilities as a manager. So you have to. The projects have to get done. They have to get done well. So you want to put the best person who's suited for that project on the project. But then you also want to, get people promoted. And if a project would be good for getting someone promoted, you want to, put them on there and inch them forward.
Exactly. And you probably have 8 engineers who all have different needs, and you have to balance them all because you can't just, realistically, you can't work on one person at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta, it's kind of like, the mental model I have in my head is like, imagine, this is so stupid. It doesn't even make sense. I'm not even gonna say it. But basically, you're trying to like inch everybody forward, and sometimes you gotta like inch one person forward a little farther, just because that's the project that matches them best, even though the other person who's farther behind probably needed it more. Mm-hmm. But then you gotta just kind of, I don't know, balance that. It's like slowly moving everybody up, and it's not always equal, or you got to pick and choose.
What's nice is that in most cases you have more than one engineer on a project, so you can usually get a pairing of really solid for this project and will really get something out of this project. And then you've created a learning opportunity for one person and a mentorship opportunity for the other person, and you're still going to get the work done.
True. Yeah. The mentorship one. That's a good point.
That's usually what it is for the more senior engineers. It's like figuring out how to direct somebody else's work and sort of disseminate the knowledge and give direction without doing it.
I have a question that I wondered since the day I got hired. Do managers have any say when, like, if someone applies, it goes through recruiting, they do the application, and then I'm assuming there's like a pool of candidates that like make it to, basically the offer level. Does the manager get to choose like which person he thinks or she thinks would fit their team?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You get more or less control over this depending on the company. Like at smaller startups, I've been involved the entire way through. Square is a little bit more, we have like a very strong recruiting team that's pretty autonomous. So there is sort of a level of people coming in that skips me. But once we're looking at candidates and interviewing candidates, you very much get to say, this is the person I'm interested for this reason. Usually you're working with the recruiter in advance, describing exactly the type of engineer you're looking for so that they're giving you candidates that are roughly a match. Like if I have an open spot for something it's an Android engineer, they're not going to send me every Android engineer that looks like they might be good. They're going to be sending ones that seem like a reasonable level of experience with like the interest I need and whatever else the case might be. But at the end of the day, it is the hiring manager for the individual team that gets to make the hire no hire decision.
So what kind of things did you tell recruiting that you were looking for when you put together?
It depends on the role. In most of the cases on this team, I've really just been looking for Android engineers who are really interested in product development, and I'm looking for the right type of person for the team. I haven't needed to fill like a specific technical gap or anything. But when I'm looking at those things, I look for people who are generally highly collaborative. It's obviously very important that everybody can work with the rest of their team. Nothing is really done in a silo. I also look for people who generally are kind of curious and want to. I don't know how to verbalize this. Like I'm interested in people's ability to like the thought process there. I generally don't really want engineers who are code monkeys necessarily, even if they're super talented. I want people who I think have the potential to become like owners of the code in one way or another.
Cool. I kind of assumed that was the case, like that, recruiting wasn't just here, we're giving you this person, because that doesn't really make sense because the manager has to figure out, well, would their personality fit well in my team? Do I.
Experience level is a big thing too. Like if you're looking for a senior engineer, you need to make sure they have the skill set required to mentor the rest of the team effectively. If you're looking for a junior engineer, it's a lot more about the future potential than it is about the current capability.
Yeah. Actually, that's a great segue. Do you think you're good at identifying talent? Like, say you have a young, inexperienced person, or like relatively inexperienced, non-senior. Do you think that you are good at being like, oh, that person has potential. That person is going in this amount of time. This person is going to be very good.
It's a partial yes. The answer is definitely yes. I think the potential is easy to spot. I can think of a few examples off the top of my head really easily. Not necessarily how much time, because that really has a lot to do with interest in the path you choose to take. And not everybody necessarily is driven by leveling itself. But I do think it's easy to spot. I think the interesting thing is, can I spot it early enough? Once I've worked with somebody for a few months, I can definitely spot it. But for a super junior person, I'm not quite confident in my ability to spot it like in the room in an interview in that way.
Yeah, I don't think I could. I have to, like, if just thinking about the interviews that I've been on and listening to some people talk and then watching them code, there is sometimes a huge disconnect.
Yeah.
Like some people can talk the talk almost like they've been coached, and you're like, yep, that sounds good. Wow. Yep. That is definitely the right answer. Yep. That is what I would do. And then they'll go to like do something. They'll just fall apart,
This is actually how I got my first job, I feel like. So I was a boot camp graduate. I don't know if you know that. That's like we didn't even talk
I think
about
you told
that
me.
earlier.
I think you told me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so coming out of that, I got referred to the company I eventually ended up working in, but in the interview, we were talking about sorts, and they were sort of probing my knowledge, and they were like, can you describe a merge sort? And I was like, well, there's a whiteboard. Do you want me to just write it out? And they're like, oh, if you think you can do that, go for it. And I was like, okay, because like it's a boot camp, like they have you literally memorize this stuff.
Hmm.
And then like a month or two into the job, the guy came over to me and was like, oh, I realized after the fact that like that was just completely memorized and whatever, but it seems like it's going well, so good.
Yeah.
And that's a sort of like, I can see how that comes across as like, oh, this person really deeply understands this algorithm, but I don't know. I don't necessarily think like things like that are really even a test of intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. Those. Yeah. I mean, that's straight memorization at that
Yeah.
point. Yeah. Unless it's a problem you've never heard before where you have to apply those things, then it's pretty much just memorization.
It's anything that's like I don't want to say simple, but like a canonical basic software engineering concept like that is,
Yeah.
I think, too simple to just ask about. I'd much rather give somebody a problem that is not straightforward and see how they approach it. And like, it's possible that failure is even okay. My favorite interview problems tend to be multi-step ones that get progressively harder, so you can like see people succeed with things that are very understandable, and then see how they deal with things that are tough.
Makes sense to me. What do you do if I don't know if you maybe you've encountered this, but I don't. If you did, had no idea, and you hit it well. Um, has anybody ever not gotten along? Like team members ever not gotten along, and then you had to like, get in the middle and be like, hey, quit that.
Yeah,
know?
not at Square, thankfully.
Okay.
Yeah, I have. I actually had an instance once that I had to kind of escalate up, and the person I think eventually got let go. It sort of happened above me. But yeah, there was one I was really not having a lot of luck with at all. It was really one-sided. I can't really talk about it too much, but there was sort of this one guy who was really deeply trying to help this other guy, and the other guy was just kind of very aggressive at work and sort of like leaning on guy one to solve all of his problems, sort of berating him when he couldn't or wouldn't. It was a bit of a weird situation.
Okay. Well, yeah, I didn't think it happened at Square. Everybody seems to get along. But I thought, it's kind of unlikely if there's been no one to ever not get along. And so I thought maybe you were just like doing a great job of hiding it, but
There are a lot of times where I'll help smooth over like a disagreement or a misunderstanding. Usually you can get through those situations by sort of talking to the person and trying to help them understand, zoom out a little bit, understand the context of what's happening, see how their actions are actually impacting the other person, where simple changes can be made. With the guy from the story that I sort of quarter told, that did not go very well. But in most cases, it's pretty easy to get through to people, especially if you can communicate that you're sort of on their side, right? Like if there's a disagreement, what you ultimately want is for it to be resolved and for both people to be happy and feel like they can move forward with a good working relationship. And if you talk to people, that's usually what they want as well. So once you can get there, it's usually the how tends to be pretty easy.
I got a good question for you. This I already know the answer, but
Okay.
I want the people listening to hear your answer because it's a great answer.
I'm nervous.
No, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, duh. What do you do if you have a feature deadline and it's not like the engineers are telling you it needs more work. It's not ready. What product people are like, we need this. We need this
Then I
now.
have anxiety. To
Huh?
answer your previous question, that's what gives me anxiety. Really, the answer is that I try as hard as I can to not end up in that situation. If I end up in that situation, I feel like I have personally failed because it means that either something was going wrong in engineering that I didn't see early enough. Like if we're really at the end, it means that I have not seen that the amount of work does not fit in the available space, and that is a big part of my job. If this happens, it also means that I haven't properly communicated it to product or GTM or like any other stakeholders probably. So that's
But
it
what if you do
obviously
end up?
we
But
see
what
it
if you are
happen.
there?
But if you end up there,
Yeah.
I think you do a number of things, and some of them might work, some of them won't work. I think number one, you see if the deadline is a real deadline, right? Like sometimes they are. Sometimes seller communication has gone out and things need to happen. We need to ship something. Usually it's not. Usually we're shipping to a beta or an alpha, and we can move the date. If we can't, my second question is, can we cut scope? Usually we are only shipping to a beta or an alpha, right? Because we're not going to ship to all of our sellers all at once. So usually there's some sort of midpoint you can hit where we're going to address the seller need, but maybe not ship the full thing, follow up later, and explain to them, what's happening and why, when they can expect to see more. If both of those are a no, and it's really you have to ship the full thing in time, then what I try to do is just go into defensive mode and like clear the calendar for my team. Really, we've never been in that state at Square yet, but that's probably when I would do the sort of more typical war room thing and be like, hey, like we are on this for the week. This is our top priority. We need to find help with other things. Like if somebody had an on-call shift, I would talk to one of the other EMs to see if they could get that shift rescheduled, swap with somebody else, things like that. There are also sometimes you can go get more people from another team, depending on what the project is. If there's even help to be had, like if people have the right expertise and can plug in quickly. Basically try everything I can to make the answer not be just get it done. If it really has to be at the end of the day, then I will try to message that to people as well as I can, try to create the space for them to do the work, and then try to follow up with some sort of like celebratory thing, make people feel good about it, probably encourage people to take some time off after the fact. Like if you give more of yourself up front, that's great, but like I should appreciate it and try to give it back as well.
That's actually not what I expected. That was much more detailed. That was a good answer.
Well, I'm curious what you expected.
No, that wasn't what I expected. I expected you to say, well, I think I can only think of one time when this has happened. But I don't think it wasn't like an extreme circumstance. And something wasn't ready, and then we just pushed the deadline back. And I thought that was great. Like
that was the first answer I gave. Yeah, like I typically what I try to do for any given problem is there an easy solution? And if it's like the client work needs another week to complete, that's probably the easiest solution, unless there's like a strong reason that can't happen. And then it really just becomes like more of the work is predominantly social. Like I have to go talk to the right people, communicate the problem accurately, communicate the importance, and find a middle ground.
Yeah. No, you had a great answer. That was great. It was like there's a bunch of things you try, and then last resort is war room.
Yeah.
Clear everybody's calendar. Let's go, basically.
Yeah, unfortunately, at the end of the day, if it's like I've really messed up and we have to get it done, then we get it done, and everybody gets to yell at me. Maybe, I don't know. But I think I know the project you're talking about, and I would even point out that deadline I pushed like 2 months early. Like we were still really far out when I said, hey, we're going to need another sprint to do this. And I think at that point that was not a problem.
I was pretty new, I think. Maybe I was
further back.
I think I was only like 6 months in or something. And yeah. So I didn't really I wasn't comprehending a lot, but I know that being rushed to do things and pushing them out before they're ready is a bad idea. So I remember appreciating that we just pushed the deadline back. I
always think it's helpful. And then there's an important follow-up to that, right? We don't just push it back and say, awesome, we created more space, we're going to ship on time. We retro it and we look at the estimates and we try to do better next time. And that's why I feel like the team is building in more and more time for the things that we traditionally miss. And I think that's been really helpful. And I think even though, our go-to-market peers might be mad at us that we needed to push a deadline up front, if we get better at it over time, we're going to end up pushing way less stuff, which is ultimately what they want. So I honestly think in a lot of cases that being honest about what's going on and why is really the best thing to do, so everybody can understand. If you just pretend the work can magically get done, then everybody will always assume the work can magically get done.
I got one last question for you, and then we got to go because we're almost at an hour here.
Go for it.
Do you have anybody? I have a ton of people who I would consider mentors at work, but I think it's easier to find as a engineer programming every day. Maybe, I don't know. This is just my assumption. Do you have like mentors, people who have helped you, taught you things? Like you're very knowledgeable and you haven't been a manager for a very long time. So is there? Did you just pick all this up on your own, or did you
Uh,
know?
I both. I mean, I've been a manager for 5.5 years now, which is, you know, if we see that in like IC terms, that's
I
probably
guess
what,
that is a
like
long time.
mid-level somewhere.
True.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I pay attention to a lot of things, which maybe helps. I've been a manager at 3 different orgs, which I think really helps. All of those have been different, so I've had to I have felt myself sort of become more perceptive and think about things differently at each one.
Yeah, I'm sure you see what like at this point you know what doesn't work probably.
For the most part, there are sometimes new challenges, right? Especially like at Square, we've had some technical challenges that are like of a scope that I had never seen before because like didn't have that seller base.
Hmm.
Um, But to answer the direct question, I have not had very many people I can think of as true mentors, but I have definitely had a few. And my first manager really comes to mind. I feel like a lot of my management philosophy is really based on him. He was the manager of that 3-person team I was talking about. He very much, from day one, like boot camp grad, no real experience, he very much treated me as like an engineer that was valuable to the team, and he gave me real work, and he really worked with me, and he, I think, is responsible for turning me into a way better engineer than I would have been in a very, very, very short amount of time. And I walked away from that experience really being happy with the relationship that I had with him. Like it felt like there was real trust there, and he really cared about developing me, and I could go to him with anything, and he would really tell me what he thought. And even times where he gave me like negative feedback, I always felt like he did it with a lot of care. Like I always understood why we were having the conversation. It was never about like, Mike, you should have done this thing instead. It was like, this is why this is important. I don't know. Yeah, a lot has really stuck with me, and I've sort of kept up with him throughout the years. I actually talked to him a bit when I took this job.
Yeah, I what you said makes sense to me. Like I think if I was to leave Square, we would probably keep in touch.
I would
And
love to. I keep in touch with a lot of people. Most of it is social, but I do have some people come to me and ask about career stuff, and those are always really fun conversations to have because you can also there's this thing where within work you can never talk about like opportunities elsewhere, right? I don't want you to leave Square, so why would I be like, hey,
yeah,
go think about working somewhere else? But when
yeah, yeah.
somebody's at a different company, it's actually really nice to be able to have those conversations and talk about like, okay, well, what do you really, you know, to compare the various jobs. What have you really liked? What have you really hated? Let's figure out what actually would work. And I get a lot of like, what's it like working at Square too, which makes sense.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I should actually. Okay, I should ask one more question because I know people
Let's
want
do
to know
it.
the answer too.
We have some
But
minutes.
we got a couple minutes here. What? Yeah, what would you tell people who are aspiring to work at Square? Like how? Like I don't know. I guess just general advice because there's a million things you could even get specific on there. Like they want to work at Square. What advice would you give?
Square is a tough one because it's a really confusing company. Like there's a lot of orgs within it. It's not clear what they all do. Honestly, I'd say the best thing to do is to start talking to anybody who works at Square if you can swing that somehow. I think coming in with an idea of what you want to do gives you a bit of a leg up as a candidate. I found it really hard to suss out the various opportunities. Like when I went through the interview pipeline, I was essentially offered 2 jobs. Even at the time, I had kind of trouble understanding what the 2 jobs would be like. And I ended up taking the restaurants one for a variety of reasons, and I'm happy I did. But I think the more you know going in, the more you'll be able to accurately assess if the team you're being offered is a team that will speak to you. There's a lot going on at Square. The other thing I would say for the actual interview is to do a little bit of studying. I don't think our technical problems are outrageous at all. I think they're pretty doable, but a lot of them do veer towards the more algorithmy side. I guess not so much on mobile. The mobile take home is pretty standard if you know your stuff. But I think a little bit of studying is probably helpful. And then I think the thing a lot of people miss for interviews in general is brainstorming. I think it's important to think critically about the work you've done and why it was useful, whether it was useful to the business or you personally or something. I think you really need to be able to tell a story about your work. And I think a lot of people are asked, tell me about a project where you X on the spot and kind of fumble, even though they might actually have a really great answer.
Yeah, it's good advice. Okay, Mike. That's it. You got a meeting to go to, don't you?
It's been great. Yeah, I have a meeting to go to, and I'll see
Okay.
you in a meeting shortly.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for doing this. It was fun. And I still got a whole bunch of stuff I wanted to ask you, so we might have to do it again. We'll
We
see.
can always do a part two. I had a great time.
I'll put Mike's Twitter down below if you want to follow him. And maybe if you're lucky, he'll answer
Don't use
your.
it.
That's okay. Send him a message anyway, but your questions is square.
Feel free, but my Twitter is literally Paddington retweets. Like, it's the whole thing. I'm not
Okay.
kidding.
Maybe he won't respond.
Thanks, Mitch. Bye.